For more on how this story is unfolding in Hong Kong, let's go live to our reporter there, Oliver Farry. Oliver, the UN calling this a chilling message for media freedom. What does the usage of this national security law say about how far Beijing is willing to go to rein in dissent?
Well, it's certainly Hong Kong's free media, which is, even at this juncture, is still vastly freer and far ahead in the freedom stakes of the mainland, is very much a bugbear for the Hong Kong government and also for Beijing. Secretary of Security John Lee yesterday said that this particular case was not targeting reporters or journalists. So the government is still trying to claim that there is freedom of the press in Hong Kong, that nothing has been changed, that these are simply extraneous examples. But Lee also warned journalists and reporters to shun so-called irresponsible journalists, and by that I presume he meant people like Apple Daily or anyone that might infringe the national security law. So there's very much an ambivalence there. Yesterday's incident seemed rather inevitable as yet another milestone in the erosion of press freedoms in Hong Kong. They've been happening with rather alarming regularity over the last couple of years. The public broadcaster RTHK has had its much admired editorial independence compromised by the government. There was a case recently of a freelance journalist being convicted on a very arcane charge of accessing a motor registry, something that a pro-Beijing journalist was acquitted of. And so these are very much incidents that the Hong Kong government is using very much legal means in order to sideline journalists and critical media. Many Apple Daily staff have said that they expect that the newspaper will eventually be forced to close. It may not actually be willfully censored like some pro-Beijing media in Hong Kong would like to see, but more just by being made impossible to trade. As we've seen yesterday, its stocks were frozen on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, so it just might not simply be possible to continue to do business as opposed to being censored in a very explicit way.
So a lot of concern throughout Hong Kong's media circles, but what about in the general public? What's the reaction been today?
Well, the Hong Kong public pretty much voted with their wallets today. Many of them queued at 1 a.m. at newsstands to get copies of Apple Daily. The newspaper ran one of its biggest ever print runs, about 500,000 copies, which is quite massive considering there's only about 7.5 million people living in Hong Kong. They did the same thing last August. They pretty much sold out then, and it was very hard to find a copy anywhere in the city today. These are very much small acts of resistance that are the only resort now to many people in Hong Kong. It has been the case of a number of other businesses that have been targeted by either police or government or are associated with lawmakers and activists who are currently in prison. They have had large numbers of people flocking to their outlets in order to do some solidarity consumption, so to speak. So even if Apple Daily, it's one of Hong Kong's most popular newspapers, but it's not to everyone's taste. Quite a lot of people find it a little bit sensational, even though it's politics they might agree with. But an awful lot of people went out there today. Some of them even said it was the first time in 20 years they had purchased a physical newspaper. So while certainly not everyone in Hong Kong endorses the politics of Apple Daily and the pro-democracy camp, there are certainly plenty there that were willing to go out on the streets today and in whatever way they could offer their own support.
Right, and endorse their right to exist, if not the paper themselves. Our reporter in Hong Kong, Oliver Farry, thank you so much for your update.